Okay, so let's talk about our 5-point summaries. Now, in past videos, we've talked about our measures of central tendency, our mean, median, and our mode. In last video, we talked about our measures of spread, which is our minimum and our maximum and our range and our interquartile ranges, our Q1 and our Q3, as well as our median. Those numbers, those measures of spread, are actually referred to as our those 5 numbers you get are called your 5-point summary. So our 5-point summary basically covers our minimum and our maximum, our interquartile range, and our median. Okay, so I've made up some numbers for this. We've got just some made up: our minimum, our maximum, Q1, our Q3, and our median. Now, the reason why we have these 5-number summaries, these 5-point summaries, is so that we can actually graph that information. The type of graph that we do is called a box and whisker plot. So let's have a look at a generic box and whisker plot to start us off. Here we have our generic one, and you'll see that there is some alignment in terms of those 5 plots, the 5-number summaries, our 5-point summaries. We have our minimum represented right down the end down here as just a single dot. We have our Q1 data represented as a line, our median or our Q2 represented as a line, and we have our Q3 or our interquartile on that upper half, the 75 percentile, is represented with a line, and then our maximum is represented with a dot. Now you'll see that each of these represents 25% of the data. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that the first 25% of the data is represented in the distance between the minimum and the Q1. This represents 50% of the data from Q1 to Q3, right? Each one of these is 25%. So it's a way of representing all of your data, 25%. It's a way of representing all of your data into like little discrete chunks, so you can see where the data lies, or where most of the data lies. Okay, that's important to remember that. So, all right, so looking at our made up numbers that we had before, there's our minimum, there's our maximum, we have our Q1, our Q3, as well as our Q2. Okay, so let's talk about constructing box and whisker plots. And by the way, you can tell why it's called a box and whisker plot. We have boxes, and then these things are called whiskers. I know, it's very well named. All right, first thing we're really going to need is we are going to need to have a scale. So our scale here represents our continuous line of information. It's got arrows on both ends. You will see that we have each of these points plotted according to their position on that line, on the number line. Okay, there's our 21, which is our median, there's our 23, and here's our 28. And you'll notice that we've got a long whisker, very long whisker on this left hand side down here. Very short position here for this percentile, for this 25 percentile group here. It's quite little. Now that will mean that when we start to talk about and discuss the differences between box and whisker plots, that'll give you something to talk about. Okay, so that's how you basically, that's what a box and whisker plot is. So that's 5-point summaries or 5-number summaries and our box and whisker plots.